Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Kumi Now online session. If you are new here or you're not familiar with Sabil, I can link our YouTube channel, which we post some of our past recordings as well as our website. So today is an exciting session. Today, actually, April 4th is Palestinian Children's Day, so we wanted to focus actually a session on this. And so our topic today will be on children in military courts with Addameer. And Addameer is a wonderful organization, so we can hear about their work. And we're joined today by Sahar Francis from Addameer. So I would like to introduce her for a bit before she does her presentation, but after her presentation, we will have a Q&A. So if you have questions, please put it in the chat. If you have comments as well, put it in the chat. Unless you have a question, you can raise your hand. But since we have a short time, we don't want to spend too much time on comments, people raising their hands to make comments. So Sahar Francis is a human rights lawyer and the director of Addameer for Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association. She has been working with Palestinian prisoners for more than 30 years, is very well active in the civil society in Palestine. So it is an honor to have her join us today to share her knowledge and present on her work. So thank you, Sahar, and we look forward to hearing from you today.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me tonight with you. It's a pleasure for me to always, I think this is my second time to join you in these briefs, and it's really very important for us to talk about the prisoners' issues, since, as you said, it's the Prisoners' Month. The 17th of April is the Prisoners' Day in Palestine. And actually, the last year and a half were very, very difficult year for the whole prisoners movement, and especially for the children who were detained and imprisoned in these months. Unfortunately, last week we lost one of these child detainees inside custody. He's a 17 years old boy, Walid Ahmed, that lost his life for health neglect issues. He was affected by scabies, the skin disease, and it was developing with another infection, and he couldn't survive. His case reflects how bad is the situation for the whole prisoners inside custody, but especially for children in these held in these horrific conditions. As you may know, that the Israeli occupation were always for decades using the issue of imprisonment actually to control the whole Palestinian society. And especially when arresting children, you would wonder why the occupation would arrest hundreds and thousands of children every year and torture them, ill-treat them, arrest them under administrative detention. What's the purpose? So maybe the occupation will claim these people, these children were involved in activities against the occupation or causing serious threat to the occupation. Believe me that more than 85% of these children, if not 90% of these children, would be involved in very simple activities like social media, especially in these days. It's mostly about social media involvement, like writing things in their Facebook or other platforms, and would be considered as inciting for violence, or sharing in demonstrations in these villages where the settlements, the wall and other confiscating lands are still going on, and people in each village would be demonstrating on weekly basis, and for throwing stones. That shouldn't be such a serious action, but still they arrest children in systematic way, And we believe because they know that the impact on the children is something that don't end when you are released from detention. But this harsh experience will accompany these children for long years after, and this is definitely will affect a whole generation in the occupied territories. And was the case always. Also, they can force children easy to confess and share information, not just about themselves, but about their colleagues in schools and about the adults in their communities. And becomes a very important source of information for the occupation about other activists, especially those that they organize or mobilize activists in these villages and towns. And of course, in order to oppress and send a very serious message for the others, especially other children, that the price would be very high. If you are involved in any activities against the occupation, you would pay a very high price. And this is how they were actually using the military orders, the military courts, also the civil law inside Jerusalem in order to control the whole Palestinian society, including children. You should know that children in the occupied territories could be subjected for two different legal systems. Those living in the West Bank, they would be arrested and prosecuted according to the military orders in military courts. But those that reside in Jerusalem, residents of East Jerusalem, they would be subjected for the Israeli criminal procedures and the Israeli law in the Israeli civil system. And after the war on Gaza in October 23, they also started to arrest tens of children from Gaza. And was even worse than what we experienced in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, because lots of these children were disappearing. We didn't we couldn't locate the place where these children were kept for the first couple of months. Families were reporting that their children got missed, and we were communicating with the army, trying to know where these children are held without any success. It took us, all the Palestinian human rights organizations, also with the other Israeli colleagues, human rights organizations that we were collaborating with. We couldn't visit these children in detention till after more than 6 months of the war. And till today, they have children from Gaza detained inside Israel in very bad conditions, in totally isolation from the outside world, because most of them, they were not visited even by the lawyers. Of course, the Red Cross Committee is banned from visits inside the prisons in total. Like they are not able to visit, not the children, not the elderly, no one, since October 23. Family visits are totally canceled as well since October 23. So all the 12,000 Palestinian prisoners held inside the Israeli prisons are totally disconnected from their families, from the outside world. We can manage, the lawyers, we can manage to visit them, but under lots of restrictions. Each visit would be limited for 3 prisoners for very short time, once a month. As a lawyers, we also facing lots of restrictions on our legal work, so it's very complicated. But this is, don't count when you think about the conditions that these children face inside the prison. Of course, in any act of arrest, it would be accompanied with lots of violence. The children, as the adults, they would face lots of intimidation, harassment, strip search in some cases. In some cases, also sexual harassment, whether verbal or physical sexual harassment. In all of the cases, children would be arrested after midnight, usually grabbed from their beds in the middle of night in front of their parents that they cannot protect them. And this gives a very bad impression on the child himself first, because his family cannot protect him, cannot save him from being detained. And it's very difficult for the father or the mother that they cannot protect their child. So of course, this is also makes a conflict in this relation of the parents and their children. And the children would be taken to interrogation centers, the same interrogation centers as the adults. Although inside Israel, for example, they claim that the interrogators are special interrogators, that they were trained to deal with children. Of course, according to the Israeli law, there is a whole set of different rights that applies for children, but this is not always applicable for Palestinian children, even under the Israeli law. So there is discrimination in the legal system when you are Palestinian child or an Israeli child, because Palestinian children, even in the Israeli civil system, they would be classified as people who committed the crime with ideological motivation. So it's classified as security crimes, and based on ideological motivations. Even throwing a stone would be associated with the fact that you are a Palestinian attacking Jewish people. So it's always long period in detention, long sentences, more serious sentences than if you compare it with other Israeli child criminals, that they would be arrested for similar activities. Of course, in the military system, the children are not protected at all according to the international standards of the protection of children according to the Convention for the Child's Rights. Although Israel is part of this international treaty, but of course, Israel denies the applicability of the international human rights law on the occupied territories. They don't reflect these standards in the military court system. And up till 2012, actually, they were prosecuting children in the same military court as the adults. The change came in 2012 when they, 2010, sorry, when they created the military court for juveniles. But actually, it's just about separating the juveniles physically in the process of the trial between adults and juveniles. But the juveniles wouldn't be offered any other sentence but just the custodial sentence, which means that the court will always send the child for prison no matter what he did. There's no other alternatives. While according to the international law, the imprisonment against a child should be the last tool that the court should use. In our case, most of these children would spend months over months in detention. Currently, there's around 350 children from the West Bank and East Jerusalem inside the prisons. As I said, we don't know the exact number of those from Gaza that they are arrested, but some of them, they were released in the last couple of weeks. All of the child prisoners are held in 3 prisons inside Israel. One is near Ramallah city called Ofer. One is near Haifa inside Israel is Addamoon. And the other one is Megiddo, where they have also those from Gaza in Megiddo. In these 3 facilities, the children are separated from the adults. They are held in their own sections. But as I said, they are facing more or less the same conditions, the same torture, the same abuses, the same health concerns. Since the beginning of the war, the Israeli prison system started with a systematic starvation policy. It was reflected in the fact that they minimized the amount of the food that they were offering for the prisoners and the quality of the food. For long months, the food was just bread, like 4 or 5 slices of bread in the breakfast with a very small can of cheese or marmalade or chocolate, the same in the lunch and the same in the evening, with 1 apple or 1 carrot or 1 cucumber, whatever vegetable or fruit they have. And later they added like a bit more, 2 meals a week that could include potato or rice or a small piece of chicken or like other cooked vegetables. So the children and the adults were losing lots of weight, were complaining that they are starving. Some of the children were telling the lawyers that they cannot go to sleep because they are so hungry. They cannot sleep because of the hunger. And the same happened with the hygiene stuff, they confiscated all the clothes of the prisoners. They confiscated all the books, all the quantity of their rooms, and they left them with one pair of clothes. So imagine in the winter, these children were forced to wash their shirt or underwear or whatever and wait till it's dry and then wear it again. They were offering them the minimum of the like teeth brusher or soap or anything that they need to keep their cells clean. And this has caused the disease, the spread of the scabies in between the prisoners because they couldn't survive and they were not allowed to go out to the sun for the recreation time. They were locked for 24 hours in their rooms in these conditions, unhealthy conditions, and they were offered very dirty mattresses and blankets. So this disease was seriously affecting the prisoners, and everyone who had other like health complications suffered a lot. We lost 63 prisoners in the last year, like up till this case of Walid last week. Since the beginning of the war till last week, we lost 63 prisoners inside the prisons out of the bad health conditions and the torture that they faced. And Walid wasn't the only case that died out of the scabies. Other old prisoners or sick prisoners who were affected by the scabies lost their life because they were not treated in proper time inside the prison. The children from Gaza who were arrested in the time of the war were handcuffed and blindfolded as the adults for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forced to sit the whole day on a very thin mattress on the ground, like without being able to talk to anyone or to raise their head. And if they dare to raise their head, they would be physically attacked and abused. Of course, lots of children from Gaza we never met. They were released, they were detained, they were spending 1 year in detention, and they were released without being able to get any lawyer visit. All the detainees, most of the detainees from Gaza, including all the children, were held under the Israeli civil law called unlawful competent law. This law is very similar to the administrative detention policy. They can use, a person from the army, an officer can issue a arrest order with open end. It's not limited for any time, and it's based on secret information. The claim would be that based on the secret information, this person is a member in a terrorist group and he's causing a serious threat to the security. And this justifies arresting you indefinitely. Each 6 months, they have to do a judicial review. Of course, you can imagine in these circumstances, the courts has no role actually. Most of the cases, the court just confirmed the orders as it was issued by the military side. So these children spent in this detention 1 year or even more than 1 year. We have several cases that the children who were arrested in the age 18 became adults while they were in detention, and now they are treated as adults and they were moved to the sections of the adults. Also, detainees, children from the West Bank or from East Jerusalem could be subjected for the administrative detention policy. The difference between the administrative detention and unlawful competent is the fact that the administrative detention order actually is limited either for 4 months or 6 months period, but it could be renewed indefinitely, which again brings you to the fact that you can spend unlimited time in detention till the army or the security forces decides to release you. Up till today, there's 100 out of the 350 detainees, child detainees. Around 100 of them, they are arrested under administrative detention, which means without any charge, without any evidence. How come, like a child that he's 16 or 17 years old would be detained without any base, without any evidence, without a clear accusation what he did? So how he would defend himself, how he would argue against this detention. And you would be held in these conditions, and it's totally arbitrary detention. This is why we say that Israel is committing war crime actually by arresting so many children, sending them for arbitrary detention, because also the military courts, the procedures and the sentences and the whole set of the military courts cannot be considered a justice applying the fair trial standards of the international law. So this also makes the detention arbitrary. And this is why our call is that the Israeli occupation should immediately release all Palestinian children without any conditions. They are not supposed to arrest children in such age and send them for long sentences and long period inside prison. Actually, that there were one female child in this period. The majority of the children, usually they are boys, not girls, that they would be arrested. But several girls from Gaza, they were arrested as well with their mothers or with the grandmother, and they were held in Addamoon. The female detainees from Gaza, they were held in Addamoon prison. This is a prison for the female Palestinian prisoners, or in the Anatot camp. It's a military base near Jerusalem. The conditions in the military detention facilities were more difficult, and the detainees faced more humiliating, degrading treatment than in the prisons under the prison authority. But in all detention facilities in the last year, the conditions were horrible and very difficult. I would stop here. There's lots of details, to be honest, to share about what the prisoners experienced in the last year on the level of the sexual harassment and the other abuses. But let's open it, and maybe via the questions, and we can discuss more.
Thank you so much, Sahar. Yeah, these are very heavy facts, but it's very necessary that we hear from it. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Someone asked just a clarification of how many Palestinians have been detained since October 7th, and of those, how many have been children? Yeah.
So again, the accurate figures are relevant to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, because on the Gaza level, the Israeli authority were not sharing the accurate statistics. So in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, around 14,000 people were arrested since the October 23. Out of them, there's around 1,000 children. The figures from the Gaza Strip much, much higher, because they arrested more than 10,000 people from Gaza. And as I said, we don't know exactly how many children were arrested from Gaza. But so far, they released a lot of people from Gaza, even before the exchange deal. So far, those from the West Bank that they are still in detention, they are 9,500. Out of them, 350 children. From Gaza, we estimate that they still have 2,500 detainees, and we don't know how many children from them, from Gaza, are still in detention.
And you mentioned a little bit of your difficulties as a lawyer and the legal challenges that you face. And so how does Addameer monitor these cases? And I know I think 2022 or 2021, Addameer was attacked by the Israeli government. So has that also continued to affect your work this year and the last 2 years? And how has that looked like for you?
Yes, for sure. So, as you said, we were, along with other 6 Palestinian human rights organizations. One of them is Defense for Children International, the Palestinian chapter. Our colleagues that they are specialized in child prisoners cases. We were declared terrorist organizations by the Israelis. So since then, actually, we're trying to keep the legal work separate from the organization. So we have lawyers and legal team that they do visit and represent in the different courts, but without direct connection to Addameer. So Addameer kept the monitoring over the cases, as well with the field research that we do. So we do have interviews with released prisoners, including children. whether in the West Bank or in Gaza over phone or video conference calls. But it's not easy. Like, you know, this is why also sometimes we prefer not to make this direct. For example, myself, I'm not always admitting that I'm the director of Addameer, not in all events, or depends.
And how can international, because it seems like, international pressure is very necessary to continue to get Israel to abide by these international legal norms, which, obviously right now is not something they're abiding by. What recommendations do you have, especially with the upcoming days honoring Palestinian children and honoring Palestinian prisoners? Can people engage in what type of actions that, in your opinion, would be helpful for the work that you do?
I think let's start from the developments on the international level that took place in the International Court of Justice in the July decision. I know it's not a binding legal decision to the state of Israel, but this is a very powerful framework, legal framework for the whole issue of Palestine, because this decision confirmed that the Israeli occupation is illegal. And the court told Israel that they should dismantle their occupation, withdrawal from the occupied territories immediately, with dismantling settlements and all. And they specified that all the actions that Israel is doing in the occupied territories are illegal. Why it's very important? Because this means that also the imprisonment and the detention and the military court system and all this system of oppression that Israel were using for decades is illegal and it should be stopped. This means you have a powerful way how to demand that all the prisoners, especially children, should be immediately released. Ending the occupation should mean that releasing all the prisoners that Israel arresting and claiming that they are terrorist people. It's not correct. All these 9,500 people were not like very couple of hundreds, less than 500 people are sentenced for serious sentences that related to violent actions. In some cases didn't cause even injury or death for anyone, but there was attempt or plan for serious activities. Most of the others are activists, students, children, political leaders, and so on. So this is why it's very important for us, especially now. I mean, you see how Israel is ignoring totally all the decisions on the level of ending the war, opening the crossing in Gaza. It's really very urgent to put every pressure that we can so the genocide stops in Gaza. And in the same time, we should highlight that the occupation should end. And this means releasing all prisoners.
Thank you so much. So we have a few other questions here. One referring back to the report you just gave us about the statistics. Other than the ceasefire exchanges, have they also released any children from Gaza since October 2023 outside of the exchanges?
Outside of the exchange from Gaza, no.
Wow. And then someone also asked if, and this is referring to Samadoun, which is the Palestinian prisoner network based in the United States, that it was accused of being a terrorist organization by the US. So someone wanted to know if this is something similar with the US and Addameer, if the US is also, agreeing with Israel's assessments of Addameer, any pressure from the US on that end.
Actually, there is an attempt by the same groups, the very right-wing pro-Israel or Jewish Zionist groups in the United States, also to pressure the administration to declare the seven organizations that were declared by Israel as illegal or terrorist to be declared in the United States. So far, we are not aware that the administration took any decision like they did with Samidun, but let me highlight, this is not a new policy. Since after September 11th, the United States, with the campaign against terror that they launched in all of the globe, and actually much with the support of the Israeli governments, different governments, because was always the case for Israel, in order to attack civil society, in order to undermine the importance of the work of human rights groups, social groups, charitable organizations, all different elements of our civil societies, it's easy. You can claim that you have secret information that this group is associated with terrorism. Remember what they did with the UNRWA. Remember how they are fighting and trying to undermine every international organization that is trying to speak or to support or to work in favor of the Palestinian people. The Israelis would accuse them of being associated with Hamas or any other terror organization and legitimize the attack against them and shutting them down. And the US is doing the same. So this is also, and I should highlight here the fact that most of the European countries and other countries, after the decision of Israel against Addameer and the other colleagues, came out with a statement supporting the organizations and saying clearly that the secret information that Israel shared with us wasn't accurate, wasn't sufficient to make this connection between the NGOs and any kind of terrorism. And this is why they continued supporting the organizations.
Thank you, Sahar. And also another question I wanted to just ask you, because we've had previous webinars in the past that focus a lot on the economic benefits of occupation that Israel gets. So I'm curious also in terms of their prisons incarceration, if Israel benefits heavily from this, especially in terms of the imprisonment of children. I don't know if you have any information about that or can elaborate on that.
Before the changes that took place after the war in 23, these prisoners were forced to buy their needs from the prison canteen, for example. If the food wasn't enough, they were enabling them to buy supplements from the canteen, but with very high prices. They were forcing them to buy shoes, clothes, or most of them other needs that they used inside the prisons with very expensive prices. And we were saying this is exploitation because they make them spend money inside the prison. Now, the prison system almost stopped all these practices, but still the exploitation goes through the sentences, because each sentence in every case in the criminal system is accompanied with very high fines. The military court system every year impose in the Palestinian prisoners more than $3 million or $4 million as fines. It's not enough that you spend 10 months or 1 year or 2 years. You have to pay for the military court system. This is exploitation. Why this money? Like, why they are taking money? from the Palestinian prisoners. And one Israeli journalist, Amira Hass, once, couple of years ago, referred a question to the army, asking them where you invest this money. And she never received a proper response about how do they invest the money back in the Palestinian society, like to develop centers or infrastructure or whatever? Definitely not. So of course there is an element of economic exploitation in the imprisonment.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for providing the statistics also, like to demonstrate how far the exploitation goes. Okay, thank you, Sahar. And yeah, we can, and certainly we have delegations. I also want to encourage people, if you are visiting Sabil in the near future, that that might also be the best way, is in-person donations.
Yeah.
And Addameer, I believe, has an office
In
in
Ramallah, we are
Okay.
based in Ramallah.
Okay, wonderful. So that can be a different way for people to
Yeah.
donate directly as well. Is there anything else that you would like to convey to our audience?
I would thank you so much for your time, and again, just to highlight the urgent need for really any action you think that can cause pressure to stop this war in Gaza. This is the most urgent thing that we need.
Thank you, Sahar. And thank you so much for your time and presentation. We
Thanks for
appreciate your work
you.
and effort.
And
Yeah.